Hi everyone, so I'm going to be talking about insights, what makes a good insight, and how can AI help us generate more of them. So I wanted to start with a quote from a guy called Jeremy Bullmore, some of you might have heard of. He asked, why is a good insight like a refrigerator? Does anyone know that quote? Anyone know the answer? Answer is because the moment you look into it, a light comes on. So just speaking about insights for a moment before we move on to the AI side of it, it's a word which gets bandied around a lot, especially in marketing. You probably see it landing in your inbox hundreds of times a day. It's in every ad platform, but what really is an insight? So the first thing is really to talk about what it's not. Research does not equal insight, but an insight is usually the product of research. Equally, data does not equal insight, but an insight is usually informed by data. So a good definition of insight is a new understanding, probably of a human attitude or behavior, as a result of which action may be taken and an enterprise more effectively conducted. So that's a little bit wordy, but to summarize it, it's really 4 criteria a great insight has to fulfill. First off, it's got to be true. This may seem very obvious, but if an insight isn't in fact true, it'll lead you really down the garden path. Secondly, it's got to be original. There's no point showing someone something that they've seen hundreds of times before. Thirdly, it's got to be memorable. And fourthly, it's got to be actionable. So just zooming out for a second, it's important to understand where insights fall in the marketing process. First off, we have our research, and then out of that research, we get our insights. Following from the insight, we get the strategy, and then, of course, we get the execution. One example, which I really like, which I think really helps bring this to life, is from a company which I'm sure you've all heard of called Compare the Market. They broke out at a time where price comparison sites were very new. There are a lot out there. They were suddenly making huge amounts of money and spending a lot of money on advertising. But what they did is they did some search analysis, and they saw that a lot of people were really confusing the brand names. A lot of people were saying things like go compare the market, or confusing it with Money Supermarket and other comparison sites. So they noticed this, and the insight was no one remembers our name, which makes sense. It's not a very memorable name. There's a lot of them out there. The strategy was then, obviously kind of clearly follows from that, become memorable. And then the execution was this guy. So Compare the Meerkat, probably one of the most memorable campaigns of the past 10 years. Almost, became a cult in itself of how popular it's been. So I just think that's a nice example to bring to life how a really simple insight can bring about a pretty game-changing strategy for a brand. So now we know what a good insight looks like. The question is, can Chat GPT generate them for us? Across the insights team, we have been testing it, trying to work out what it's useful for, what it's not useful for. The following slides just show one example, and from this example, I'll bring out some of the kind of pros and cons we've seen from it. So what we wanted to do is ask it a question which is really close to our hearts, which is, what is TIPi Group? Obviously, you guys know that. That's why you're here today. Chat GPT didn't really know the first time I asked it, so started talking about Tense, a research group at Harvard, and a technology consulting firm in Sydney. I wasn't that impressed by that, so I asked again, what is TIPi Group? I changed the capitalization because I thought, maybe there was something going on with that. And suddenly it got way closer. So, a technology consulting and digital marketing agency based in London. Sounds pretty good. I asked it a third time, and it's kind of understanding there's some confusion going on here. It's gone back to this consulting firm based in Sydney. And then the fourth time, I've asked it, and it's realized that there's 2 separate companies called TIPi Group. There's this one in London, where we are today, and there's this one in Australia. So it actually seems like a pretty good effort, considering I'm just asking it a simple question. But as Patrick really alluded to in the presentation before, it sounds right, but it's not necessarily actually right. So we're not really a technology consulting company, much more of a marketing company. Sadly, we've never worked on Coca-Cola, Canon, and fans, so it's just picked out random clients it sounds like we might have worked with. And also, this software development and digital transformation consultancy does not exist. It's completely made up. So I honestly looked for ages to see if I could find anything about it, and it does not exist. So this is a kind of silly example in some ways, but it just shows the danger of the hallucinations that AI can have. So it can make an answer which sounds completely feasible. It sounds like it could be a company, but it's completely hallucinated, made up. In general, we find that Chat GPT scores quite poorly against our criteria for great insights. So we spoke about the importance of being true. We do get a lot of factual inaccuracies if we're asking things like Chat GPT a question. Can't really be original because it's just reordering text from the corpus. It can be memorable, but as again Patrick said, it struggles to be succinct, and sometimes it ends up being quite waffly often, and dangerous to action if you're not sure if it's actually passing those tests beforehand. You're not sure it's really true. So that's just a small example of asking ChatGPT a question, but there's obviously other ways you can use it as well. And again, something we've covered, it's important that it is designed to sound right rather than be right. So is AI useless for research and insights? The answer is obviously not. There's plenty it can really help us with. And looking back at the full marketing process, we can see it really helps at the research side. It's not great at the kind of insight and strategy, but it also can be quite helpful at execution. So it may not be able to generate killer insights, but it makes a good research assistant for specific tasks. What kind of tasks might those be? So something like localization. If you're trying to change the language of a survey, it could be quite useful for that. Also data cleaning. So if you've got quite a messy database, which often happens in insights. Survey programming is another one, so working out the logic for a survey. And we see this being integrated into a lot of tools already. Analyzing qual data, so you can get lots of quite messy qual data from surveys, and AI can be really useful in helping to categorize that. And very similarly, social listening. We see already a lot of the social listening platforms, pretty much all of them, are using AI to a certain extent to categorize conversations, to try and understand what people are really saying. And brands are already leveraging this technology. So a good example from L'Oreal, who've developed something they call Trend Spotter, which is a tool which enables them to analyze conversations online. It's basically a social listening tool. Analyzes conversations online, blogs, news sites, to try and quickly detect trends in the beauty industry and allow them to move faster than their competitors. So that's a really key thing, is this ability to move faster. What do we think the future looks like? So I don't think AI is going to be taking our jobs anytime soon, but it can be really useful when it comes to supporting on repetitive and time-consuming tasks and crunching data. Within research and insights, we think the future is embedding it in existing tools and processes, allowing more data to be gathered and analysed at lower cost and faster speeds. So if we can do this right, it will allow us more time and mental bandwidth to provide real value with great insights. So, a few key takeaways before the coffee break. Beware of using Chat GPT for research. It's programmed to sound right, not to be right. Just asking it questions is not the way to go. Secondly, it can be your research assistant, but you need to be very vigilant when checking its work. And thirdly, if you want game-changing insights, you still need to hire a human. Thanks very much.